Perhaps the only thing more frustrating as a gamer than a bad game is a bad game that makes a ton of money, and unfortunately that happens far too many times than we'd like to admit. Welcome everybody to Trending10, Nemo here, and today we're going to be counting down 10 horrible games that still made a shit ton of money. These are games that were generally poorly received by critics and gamers and yet still turned a hefty profit when it was all said and done. Number 10, we have South Park. Kicking off our list is a game franchise that used to be just awful, but thankfully managed to turn things around with the Stick of Truth and the Fractured But Whole. The first South Park video game was simply titled South Park and was a first-person shooter released on the Nintendo 64 in 1998 and then for the PS1 and PC in 1999. It was clunky, unfun, unfunny, and while the graphics were pretty solid and managed to recreate the art of the TV show fairly well, there really weren't any redeeming qualities about this game. Despite the game getting awful reviews, it managed to sell around 2 million copies, likely due to it being associated with such a popular show. Number 9, we have COD Ghosts and Infinite Warfare. We're gonna go ahead and bundle these two games together for the number 9 spot. As well, they both kind of pretty much feature much identical reception. Ghosts was released in 2013 and Infinite Warfare in 2016, and both games received positive reviews for their campaigns, but were hammered for their multiplayer, with Infinite Warfare being despised by the Call of Duty community for how terribly bad it was. While Ghosts has seen a pretty recent resurgence in popularity, it still deserves a spot on this list due to the poor reception at launch, and Infinite Warfare easily earns the spot on this list due to its bad reviews and revealed trailer being one of the most disliked videos in the history of YouTube. Despite the reception for both games, Infinite Warfare managed to sell close to 15 million copies and Ghost sold almost double that, with nearly 29 million copies sold as of recording this video. Now we will have to say the only reason that Infinite Warfare sold so many copies was because it was released alongside Modern Warfare Remastered because, you know, COD 4 Master Race. Number 8, we got Hey You Pikachu. I'm not gonna lie, this game had a pretty interesting concept, and if I had been aware of it back when it was released for the Nintendo 64 in 1998, I probably would have bought it too. But I'm so glad that I didn't. Hey You Pikachu is a pet simulator where you take care of Pikachu, and that's about it. Sure, it had some pretty interesting voice recognition aspects, but the game was so simple and so barren of any real content, and what there was a very shallow and the fun was worn off in a matter of minutes. Hey You Pikachu got very poor reviews from critics, but thanks to it being associated with Pikachu, it sold almost 2 million copies. Number 7, we have Croc Legend of Gobos. Released in 1997 for the Dreamcast and the original PlayStation, this 3D platformer was developed by Argonaut Software and published by Fox Interactive. You played as a cute crocodile venturing around the world and performing various tasks in order to save Gobos from the game's villain, Baron Dante. Production originally started as a Yoshi spin-off game, but after Nintendo turned down the concept and rejected the rights to the game character, it turned into its own title, replacing Yoshi with a crocodile named Croc. The game fell victim to many of the same problems that the early 3D platformers did, such as bad controls, a horrible camera, and subpar hit detection. Despite the poor reviews, the game managed to sell over 3 million copies on the PS1 alone. Number 6, we have Game of War. I'm sure everyone's seen the ad of this little mobile game. Game of War launched in 2013 and was developed by the studio called Machine Zone. The game itself is a decent concept, mixing elements of MMOs and RTS games, but that's really where our praise of it ends. The game itself is just lame. It's repetitive, bland, riddled with paywalls. Upon release, Game of War was hammered by critics for its incredibly aggressive business model, pretty much demanding money at every turn. And yet, despite the reception, Game of War is still one of the highest grossing apps of all time. After spending a massive $40 million on their ad campaign, Game of War brought an estimated $600 million in its first year. Apparently, people really must like Kate Upton. Number 5, we have Just Dance. Given how insanely popular this series has become, it's pretty strange to think of how horribly the first game was received. The original Just Dance was released for the Wii in November of 2009, and it was met with scathing reviews targeting its simple gameplay, lack of content, and horrible movement detection that pretty much made the game pointless. Like, I mean, how are you supposed to play a dancing game when the dancing just doesn't work right? However, despite all of the odds, Just Dance managed to sell 4.3 million copies. Seriously, 4.3 million copies? I mean, to be fair, it was kind of a captive audience due to the lack of other dancing games on the market at the time, but 4.3 million? Number 4, we have Destiny 2. Okay, this game isn't nearly as bad as some of the others on this list. However, Destiny 2 earns a spot on this list because of the awful things that Bungie pulled in order to milk the name for all it was worth. Destiny 2 launched in 2017 in an effort to make up for shortcomings of the first game and really put the franchise on the map in a good way, as the last title frustrated a lot of people due to how incomplete it was at launch and how much it depended on the player buying expansions. At first, Destiny 2 seemed alright as it featured a decent campaign and some interesting multiplayer aspects. However, the in-game content was extremely lacking, and there was a heavy focus on microtransactions. But things only got worse when the first expansion was released and it locked players out from the base game features if they didn't buy it, essentially forcing them to pay for the exact same content twice. Then there was a report after report coming out exposing Bungie for lying to the player base about XP earn rates, DLC focus, and much more, leading to tons of players leaving the game altogether. So while Destiny 2 may not be a terrible game at its core, the treatment of the fans in the DLC easily earns them the spot on this list, as Bungie made way more money than they deserved with this game. But I will say that Bungie basically was under contract with Activision to have another game released in 2017, so it was pretty much Activision's fault that the game was rushed this quick. Also, if you're looking for a loot and shooter game kind of like Destiny, I recommend checking out The Division. It's actually gotten a lot better nowadays, and it's a really fun game, so definitely give it a try. Number 3, we're gonna just go ahead and say most SpongeBob games, pretty much all of them, but most of them. SpongeBob is a strange case. While the first few seasons of the show are comedic gold, regardless of how old you are, the show quickly went downhill after the shift in writing staff. The same can be said for the mini games that have come along with the seasons after seasons of the show. At first, SpongeBob games were alright, with some of the standouts being Battle for Bikini Bottom and the tie-in game for the SpongeBob SquarePants the movie. However, pretty much all of the others are just flat out bad. But because they have SpongeBob's name on it, they still managed to sell well enough to warrant another and another to be made. We all know that movie tie-in games are usually a disaster, but it seems like the TV tie-in games are even worse. Number 2, we have Kinect Adventures. This one is pretty shocking when you look at the numbers. Following the massive success of the Wii and the Nintendo's innovation with motion controls, other companies wanted to get in on that motion control gravy train. This led to the creation of the Microsoft Kinect and the PlayStation Move. While the Move was pretty much dead on arrival, the Kinect had a little bit of steam thanks to Microsoft's marketing of it. However, the Xbox 360 Kinect just didn't work properly at all and is widely viewed in the gaming community as a scam. But funny enough, despite the community hating the Kinect, it was still the home for the best-selling game on the Xbox 360, Kinect Adventures. Released in 2010 alongside the device, it managed to sell 24 million units despite the lameness and broken nature of the actual content, making it the single best-selling game on the Xbox 360. Number 1, Frogger, he's back. Before we start, I just have to ask, why did you feel Frogger needed a reboot? Anyways, Frogger, he's back was released in November of 1997 for the PS1 and the PC, and was a 3D remake of the original 1981 arcade game that introduced some new aspects and gameplay elements. The game was just awful and hammered by critics due to the bad controls, unnecessarily high difficulty, and the lack of checkpoint system, resulting in you being forced to play it over and over again just to progress if you messed up at all. Despite the horrible reception, the game was a huge success and is actually the 25th best-selling PS1 game with over 3.2 million sold. And that's not even including the PC version. Thankfully, the errors of this game were corrected in the sequel, Frogger 2 Swampy's Revenge, released in 2000, but didn't sell nearly as well due to the horrible reception of the first game. Guys, that pretty much wraps it up with this video. Let me know what you thought of it in the comment section below. Do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and until next time, this has been Nemo from Trending10, and I'll talk to you guys on the next one.